Our hosts today are Dr. Sakina Bradley, Dr. Joe Wallace, and Dr. Richard Jensen, who is also a board-certified acupuncturist, practiced independently in Shoreham, Minnesota. Let's join our hosts for today's program that will assist you in your quest for optimal health and well-being.
Welcome to House Call. I'm Dr. Daryl Lala.
And I'm Dr. Richard Jensen.
It's great to have you with us on this dimension of House Call. We're going to discuss hormones and digestion today because a lot of digestive issues and digestive health are related to hormones. And so Dr. Jensen is going to begin our discussion right away.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Lala. First thing that we wanted to look at is the hormone axis of influence of the body. And so when we look at this slide here, we're looking at the hormones. The axis of influence is one in the thalamus, which is in the middle of the brain. It controls lots of different functions. When you have a temperature, it's the thalamus who is raising the temperature of your body to give you a fever. It also, that signals the hypothalamus telling your body to say, hey, let's release some of these prohormones to act on some other tissue in the body to actually give off the hormones. And one of those major tissues in the body that give off hormones is the adrenals. Of course, that gives off adrenaline, and it gives off corticosteroids, and it gives off other estrogens and testosterone. It gives off a myriad of different hormones that affect the gastrointestinal system. Then also what it's looking at are some of these other tissues that you see as giving off hormones, like the ovaries. And then, of course, that then affects other hormone-sensitive tissues. And in the case that we're talking about is the sensitive tissue would be parts of your gastrointestinal system. And so as we go further in this discussion, we're looking at a compromised gastrointestinal system. The compromised gastrointestinal system some of its causes may be bacterial or yeast or fungal overgrowths in the system. And that may be due to an imbalance that's caused by one, as you see on the left side of on the right side of your screen, antibiotics. Now, the way that antibiotics causes this, if we come back here, the way that antibiotics cause gastrointestinal distress is that it wipes out all the good bacteria, and as well as the bad bacteria when you're using it. Antibiotics is used to get rid of bacteria. So if it gets rid of not only the bad bacteria, but gets rid of the good bacteria, usually what it leaves behind are those things that are not bacteria, such as yeast and fungi. And since your gastrointestinal system, it's all about, it's a fight for territory when it comes to these microbes. It's basically leaving the neighborhood wide open for anybody to be a squatter in those areas and overgrow in there. So it adds to yeast and fungi overgrowth. Stress is another one. If you look at stress and how that's released, you're looking at corticosteroids and adrenaline that's being put out there. And really, when you're in a fight or flight syndrome, your body is basically saying, what do I not have to do while I'm running away from the proverbial tiger? One is I'm not concerned with healing a wound right now. What I want to do is I'll just shut off the immune system at this time. Two, I'm not concerned with digesting my food at this time either. So I'll shut down my gastrointestinal system. Why? Because all that energy it wants to get into getting away from the proverbial tiger. Because if you get away from the proverbial tiger, that stress will be relieved, and you again can start to heal and digest and things like that. If not, and the tiger catches you, it's all over anyway. So it sees it as imperative that it shuts down all these things that it doesn't need. An imbalanced diet can result from that because your digestion is just really thrown off. And the loss of GI acid and alkaline balance is also there. Why? Because it shut down those areas that are secreting, say, enzymes and so forth to help you digest those foods. So we find that we're not getting as good a nutrition at those times that we have stress. And of course, the stress can also be a result of trying to fight off a bacterial infection and things like that as well. Now, as we go on to acid and alkaline pH, we want to look at that there's specific pHs that we want in our body, in these different areas of the body for digestion. Such as in the mouth, we want digestive pH at 6.0 to 7.0. That's just slightly acidic. In the stomach, we want it at 1.5 to 3.5. That's very acidic and actually is one of our first defenses against bacterial or protozoal or yeast or that kind of invasion. It's to kill off those things due to the acid. And so if we're under stress or some of those changes in our gastrointestinal system hit, it throws off our pH as well. In the small intestine, there's the proximal end of it at 3.5 to 7.0. And then as we go through it, that's actually a little bit of a typo there. We're looking at the small intestine, not the proximal, but the distal end. A lot of alkaline bicarbonates, things that buffer the acid and change it more alkaline to continue digestion, because digestion goes so far in needing acid, and then once it hits that spot, then it needs to digest the other nutrients in there and turn it more alkaline so that those things in turn can be broken down into its primary constituents for absorption into the body. We don't absorb full chain proteins. We want to absorb one little amino acids, which are the building blocks of it, and therefore we don't have an immune reaction to the small bits, but we have it to the long bits. So if we mess up our digestion in such a way, we can set ourselves up for even more gastrointestinal problems that have deleterious effects to the rest of the body, such as food sensitivities. Okay, so Dr. Lala, some common systemic diseases that can be promoted by this.
When in fact yeast or fungi are proliferate within the small intestine, they create holes. They expand the absorption holes in the lining of the small intestine, which allows them to not only cause irritable bowel syndrome, but they enter then, these toxins, these chemicals, yeast, fungi, enter the bloodstream, which transports them to the body, resulting in systemic diseases. Many of the common systemic diseases that are being misdiagnosed today, as far as the cause anyway of them, are headaches, mood swings, chronic non-productive coughs, skin rashes, psoriasis, hay fever, finger and toenail infections, abdominal gas or bloating, fibromyalgia, neuropathy, allergies, cystitis, in other words, bladder infections, people catching colds easy, fatigue, vaginal yeast infections such as candidiasis, and athlete's foot. Now, what are some of the solutions to these issues? Well, one is to see is to know, and then we want to correctly manage. So we want to then figure out what the pH is of the gastrointestinal system that Dr. Jensen just reviewed with you. Then we want to restore the proper pH. We want to diagnose any food hypersensitivities through what he referred to here already as IgG and IgE4. We want to then avoid those foods. We want to eat non-hypersensitive foods. We want to avoid sugar and dairy products and avoid yeast-containing foods. Some of the other solutions that we want to consider are possible the use of probiotics such as acidophilus, digestive enzymes, coenzyme Q10, garlic, echinacea, barley grass, EPA, DHA, psyllium powder preferably, then seed, bentonite, and allium. Now, the probiotics, which come from the acidophilus family, are natural bacteria and therefore re-inoculate the intestines. Coenzyme Q10, echinacea, barley grass, beta-carotene, vitamin A, vitamin E, and C, they all assist in restoring harmony to the gastrointestinal tract. EPA, DHA provides the essential fatty acids necessary for healing, not only of the gastrointestinal system, but inflamed tissues. Psyllium powder forms a gel which gradually scrapes away the candida, breeding ground or plaguing that's going on in the fecal matter, and that forms on the intestinal walls. And bentonite, its potential as absorbent actions of bentonite helps eliminate the breeding ground of candida and toxic metals. Now, what about garlic? Garlic is a very powerful natural astringent. It's high in sulfur. It's high in the enzyme analase. It's a wonderful product. Now let's talk a little bit more about garlic. It's a platelet inhibitor. It keeps the blood thin the way it should be. It helps produce cholinase, lipogenase, and arachidonic acid. They're all astringents. They're very, very good. They're antiviral, antiprotozoal in nature, and antifungal. Now, let's talk a little bit more about it. Sometimes it's garlic is referred to as caprylic acid. Very, very important. It has to be taken from a specific source, though, for it to be an active biological ingredient. The best known source, therefore, is in a certain area of China. Very, very important. Many times these garlic are taken from other areas of the country, and they don't produce the results that the people really need. There's also a condition that Dr. Jensen is going to now discuss called a Herxheimer reaction. Can you discuss that, please, Dr. Jensen?
Sure, Dr. Lala. Herxheimer reaction is due to candida die-off reactions. And that can be, you see the symptomology around it is a runny nose, a headache, muscle and joint stiffness, diarrhea, skin rash, vaginal irritation, and discharge. So as the candida die off, it is possible that a great deal of toxic materials, due to the waste of the actual candida being there, they're dead, but they're now a waste material that needs to be sloughed off. That as those materials are released, they are released through the bowel movements because it's in the intestinal tract. But symptoms possible can also include runny nose and headache, general muscle and joint stiffness, diarrhea, skin rashes, or vaginal irritation or discharge. That's because as they die off, they're giving off a lot of free radicals, they're giving off a lot of their own proteins, they're absorbed into the body, and these things cause allergic reactions. And those allergic reactions cause a general inflammation throughout the body, therefore it's muscle and joint stiffness, that kind of stuff that's going on. So one of the things that we want to avoid with these things, with candida also, is to avoid animal fats, because of the hormones that are contained within the animal fats. That's where they're fat soluble particles. They're actually made from cholesterol, and so they get stored in the fat, and then we ingest that fat and take them into ourselves. Refined sugars actually reduces our immune system, reduces reactivity of our immune system, making us more susceptible to these things. Dairy products, because of its mucus forming problems, as well as where the sugars that are involved within it. Stress can be deleterious to us, so we try to avoid stress. Now this is talking about perceived stress, a person's perceived stress, because there are some people who work at a certain level and just nothing gets through. Other people, just the littlest piece of straw that falls sets them off. Okay, so you have to look at each person as an individual as to what they can take, but you try to avoid stress as to its problems with shutting off the immune system. Okay, enriched bread can bring that down due to its sugar contents, as well as lack of B vitamins. Salt and excessive exercise, believe it or not. Excessive exercise, we create free radicals by our excessive exercise and put a strain on our immune system by doing so. And so that can also be something that can alter our gastrointestinal tract. Just by lowering the immune system, it allows these yeasts and fungi to have the upper hand. Then we have something called cystitis. Cystitis, it's marked by pain and burning in urination. increased urination, nocturnal urination, so you're having to go a lot at night, or sometimes there's bedwetting that may be involved, usually in young children. They'll have dark, cloudy urine, which is usually due to the white blood cells that are fighting off an infection. Foul-smelling urine, that's also due to these other particles that are in the urine from die-off. Lower abdominal pain and cramping can take place. So these are basically urinary bladder infections. And what you have to look at is 15% of menstruating women generally have these symptoms. Causes would be Escherichia coli or E. coli, food allergies, and another thing that we look at is spinal subluxations. Did you know that if you have a disturbance to your spine in which it's pushing down on your nervous system, that there's a thing that they're looking at neuroimmunological responses. And so what this can do is if you have a disturbance to that, it can actually cause your immune system to shift from type 1 to type 2 immunity, and therefore not do as well or as good of a job in fighting these infections for you, and can also switch you towards more of an inflammatory type response, therefore having the arthritic type of feelings in your joints. Back problems adversely affect not only the immunity, but interfere with the flow of essential nerve and blood supply to the urinary bladder, but also interrupt the flow of tin and tang into the genital urinary system, therefore predisposing it not only to cystitis, but to other genital urinary problems. Therefore, let's look at some natural solutions. And these natural solutions would be increase in water intake, would be a good solution to help wash things out. Ava ursi, which we'll get into that in a little bit. Golden seal, gotu kola, and cranberry or blueberry juice. Now, if alkaline urine should be re-acidified by cranberry and blueberry juice, that will help re-acidify the urine and therefore help take care of one of these things. Remember how I was talking about that the acid of the stomach helps take care of a lot of those infections as they get entered into our body? Well, once they're in the body, the acidity also of some of these fluids that we're giving off through the urinary tract, in this case for a urinary bladder infection, can help solve some of these problems too, and that's where cranberry and blueberry juice come in can be quite helpful. If alkaline should be re-alkalized, then you use golden seal and ava ursi to alkalize this area. So it's all about balance, isn't it? All about balance. How about vaginitis and leukorrhea? Well, due to overgrowth of vaginal flora, that would be vaginitis or leukorrhea, bacterial, viral, and yeast infestations can be part of this. It's commonly transmitted by sexual intercourse. Okay, so vaginitis leukorrhea, aka is Haemophilus vaginitis or Gardnerella vaginitis. So if yeast or Candida albicans gains entrance into the blood or systemic infections, can also occur. And one of the things that you should be aware of is when you have yeast that has gone systemic, which means it's gone throughout the rest of the body, when that blooms, it generally gives off upwards to 70 different neurotoxins. And in which case it affects your cognition, you're having a harder time concentration. It can create mood swings and a whole plethora of other mood or mental type problems. And so therefore it's something that if you're having problems with that or other people are recognizing that in you, it might be prudent for you to have yourself checked out. Now there's symptoms of vaginitis or leukorrhea would be vaginal itching, vulvar irritation or swelling, redness of the labia or vagina, and leukorrhea or discharge, and odor could be from that. It's more like a white curd-like vaginal discharge that suggests a yeast infection. It's creamy white or off-color discharge suggests Gardnerella, and green or yellow or frothy discharge indicates Trichomonas. So then, treatment for that would be a drug called Candida nistatin, Trichomonas metronidazole. I'm starting to falter in my pronunciation of these. Haemophilus oxytetracycline, and normalizing vaginal flora due to either using a poultice or something of some probiotics in there can be quite helpful, as well as education through programs like this can help in the treatment of that, just so that people know, one, the foods to avoid, symptoms, and when to get checked out. So then, procedure for normalizing vaginal flora, Dr. Lala.
Probably you see in front of you, but we want to precede that with this. One is certainly a good case history. Two is what we call an organic acid analysis, and these are a urine test that determines markers from certain metabolic activities within the body. And so like cholesterol is a marker. The B-complex vitamins have metabolic markers, and so do like the protozoa, the yeast, the fungi. They all have markers, and if there is a systemic infection going on in the body, such as candidiasis, then it's going to show up in it. And there are a lot of, the reason I bring that to your attention is there are a lot of people who are being treated for yeast and fungal infections when in fact the yeast fungus infection is not the cause, it's a symptom manifestation of a cause that has not been properly diagnosed. And that's the issue that we find. Most of the people that we see have already gone to the health food store, they've already gone to some chiropractor, some nutritionist, they've tried this or that, but with very little science-based diagnostic testing. Now, science-based diagnostic testing is a lot less expensive than trying this and that and this and that and failing and failing and failing and failing, and then having the problem manifest itself with other systemic disorders. So it's called an organic acid analysis. Step one in normalizing the vaginal flora, take a vaginal bulb, vaginal syringe, put about a 3% hydrogen peroxide in there, mix it with distilled water, add some live, non-sugar, low-fat yogurt, some apple cider, and some Ultraflora Plus, which is a broad-spectrum probiotic, and then that is excreted or into the vaginal vault, and then a tampon is put in, preferably a non-deodorant tampon. Once that has been in there for about a half an hour or so, if it can stay in there that long, then it is evacuated and you go to step two, which includes now mixing 3 tablespoons of 3% hydrogen peroxide into 1 quart of distilled water into a vaginal bulb. That's the same thing, 1 quart of distilled water in the first phase. Then douche very thoroughly every morning upon arising and every evening before bed, followed for 1 week until symptoms abate. There is a third procedure to normalizing the vaginal flora, and that consists of, after morning and evening douches, mix a half teaspoon of this probiotic, this broad-spectrum biotic, with 2 tablespoons of yogurt, again, non-fat, non-sugar, 1 pint of room temperature distilled water, and 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. Allow well-mixed solution to rest for about 30 minutes before it's pushed into with the vaginal syringe. And we want to continue that with one other step. Carefully then, as I said here, insert the syringe into the vaginal vault and release the solution into the vaginal vault. Insert a non-deodorant tampon again, and that should stay in there for at least a half an hour if possible. So, Dr. Jensen, you're talking about further hormone balancing, right?
Right. And so when we're looking at hormone balancing, we'll, first of all, you had mentioned about organic acids. And if you look at it, we ourselves generate waste products, okay? And we know what those waste products are. It's our bowel movements or urination. And when you look at these other things that are inside of you, bacteria, protozoal, yeasts, that kind of thing, they all have their own waste products that they just choose not to deal with within themselves and then give them up to the environment. It just happens to be that you are the environment that they give them up to. And so some of these things have deleterious effects, like we were talking about throughout this program. One of the other things that we want to look at is hormone balancing. In hormone balancing, we determine that through a 24-hour hormone analysis. And when we do that, we want to know what kind of things that you're already on, birth control pills, natural progesterone therapies in some cases. There's people who will use some creams with pro-hormones such as DHEA, things like that. And one of the things that we find is that many times people are just prescribing these things without looking at specifically what you're at. And that's one of the things that really was alarming to me when we first started doing this. I started finding people who come in with 10 times the amount of DHEA in their body that they were supposed to, or estrogen factors that were off the charts, only to find out that they were on treatment for osteoporosis and things like that, and therefore having a lot of stimulation to these hormone-sensitive tissues and promoting things such as cancer and other deleterious things that happen in their body. And so those are some of the things that we want to know what's going on, and therefore by finding this out, then we can help to bring you back into balance. And many times hormones change your outlook on the world, actually, when you get down to it. I mean, look at hormones change you from boys to men and from girls to women. And your thought process is changed throughout that whole ordeal, if you want to call it an ordeal, that the hormones do that. And so we find through treatment that many times people have become much more balanced in that as well, though we're not psychologists and work towards that. So other things that we want to look at are natural solutions, and some of those solutions are chiropractic care, spinal and metabolic type chiropractic care. Tribostan may also be another solution for that. It's a botanical taken from the plant Tribulus terratris L, and has been reported to increase the body's natural production of testosterone. So when we look at those kinds of things, something that you might want to avoid is tobacco, smoke, and alcohol. And something else to bring up here is if you have subluxations, these things affect the various organs throughout your body. If you look at over here, as we get down to some of these hormone-generating tissues, if you have a problem where you have some pressure that's being put on a nerve somewhere throughout the spine, you're affecting how well these organs are working, because they're all being told how to work through the nervous system. And that comes through pressure, such as this bone being put out of place, putting pressure on this nerve. And it's really very little pressure to change that. It's only about the pressure of, say, a quarter resting in your hand. That kind of pressure is the same kind of pressure that will actually affect a nerve like this. So, Dr. Lala, do you have any concluding thoughts?
Concluding thoughts are you have one body. They promote things that you can cut things out and put new things in, and some of those things work. But if you don't take charge over your health and get some scientific-based evidence and diagnostic testing, then you're not going to be able to manage your health. You're just living in denial. You really are. So we hope that you've had a good time with us today. You can video stream a lot of other programs off of our website. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you on the next aspect of House Call. Thank you now.